Howdy folks, welcome back to the Colorado Woodrat channel. This is episode 7 in the truck camper conversion build series. And in this one, I'm going to be installing that metal door frame. Hopefully this will be the last little bit of metal work that I need to do to round out the interior. I gotta say, I've been whittling away at all the metal that I've had laying in the shop. It feels really good to see it diminishing from in here and adding to out there. I've got my work cut out for me in regards to putting this metal door frame in. I want to make this as square as possible, but I don't have a square hole to put this in right now. The top is wider than it is at the base, so I'm going to have to do some accommodation. Maybe I'll end up putting some of this other scrap metal to use. I do have to cut out some smaller panels and fit that to the backside of the roof and round out the overall backside. I'm also really hoping that I get far enough that I can take some of the scrap angle iron that I have and weld it in as structural support at the front where I ripped out those previous supports. I'm getting closer and closer to being complete with all of the major welding portions. With that said, there's a lot to do, so I'm going to jump right into it. So I knew pretty early on that the frame that existed wasn't necessarily straight. You could see it bowing apart at the top of pre-existing doors. That has unfortunately left me with this ugly gap here, but I'm going to come up with a couple of different ways to fill it. At the low end, I'm just going to fill weld in between, and then I'm going to try cutting a piece of sheet metal that can spread that gap. We'll see if it works. The other way I'm going to go about this is to cut a very thin triangular piece of sheet metal to fill that. We'll see if it works. It might be too narrow at some points and just melt right through, but I don't really have much choice. Onward. Well, I started applying the body filler yesterday around the door weld seams. Never done that before. It looks like I have not done it before, but I did try sanding it down on a few places and it sands down just fine. So I think in the end it's gonna look great. I was using a piece of wood yesterday to smooth out those transitions between higher and lower spots. There's no flexibility in that. So while I was at work, I picked up a pipette tip box lid, cut it down. That has a little bit more flexibility. So I'm gonna use that to spread that body filler around. Wish me luck. I don't know about the rest of you, but if I get heavily invested into a project, that's almost all I can think about. So, laying in bed last night, trying to go to sleep, I started thinking that I might want some sort of like a small eave, to shed some of the potential water and snow that's going to hit this thing, just to further protect the doors a little bit. So, I was a little out of order on my order of operations because I wasn't thinking about this beforehand, but right there, I'm gonna go ahead and install a sloped piece of metal just to help shed the water a little bit. That'll be my project this morning. I may end up having to reapply some of that body filler. I don't have any experience with it, as I've mentioned before, up to now. So I don't know if small tack welds in areas near that is going to cause enough heat to have that flake off. I guess I'll find out. Wow, that was a pain. That was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. I apparently haven't learned my lesson as far as that goes. I knew going into this that the truck had seen better days, so that unevenness between the top and the bottom wasn't wholly unexpected. But man, trying to fix that and fill those gaps caused me all sorts of headaches. I got it done though, and it looks pretty good. It'll look a lot better once it gets covered up with paint, I think. Something that was new to me in this episode was the use of a body filler. I've never used a body filler before, but I'm actually really surprised at how durable that stuff seems. I bought the kind that says that it's tappable, meaning that you could put threads in it, so presumably it has quite a bit of strength and durability to it. I used a lot of body filler in there where I needed to, and then I've sanded it flush. That sandability factor to that body filler has made it pretty forgiving. There are some portions where I just slathered it on and then sanded it flush, and it came out great. That big gap that was on the right side was a tough nut to crack, but I got there in the end. I ended up cutting a very thin triangle and welding that in place, and then backfilling with body filler where needed. The metal door frame that I've installed is very square, since I won't be able to shim the wooden door frame that I will be installing down the line. And since I was doing work on the backside anyway, I figured I'd take care of a few other items. For instance, I cleaned up a bunch of the rust spots that existed on the exterior taillight portion. I removed the kick plate and cleaned it up. Really glad I did that. It looks much better now. And I removed the taillights in preparation for painting. This one I'm a little disappointed about. It turns out there were no connections that I could actually just remove and completely take the taillights off. I would have had to cut wires and then resolder them back on. I figure I can probably just wrap them in plastic bags for the time being and paint around them. Another thing that I decided to do on the fly for this one was add an eave over the door. When I was looking at the side cabinets, they actually had a small eave that was built into the side of the truck, and that gave me the idea. So I went into the shop, took some scrap metal, fabricated one up, and threw it up there. I think I'll be really glad down the line that I put this on. It's not a huge element that's going to shed a ton of water, but it might help some. I'll take what I can get. The last thing I did is I pre-drilled some holes where I'm going to insert riv nuts to attach the wooden door frame to. This might not make sense right now, so you'll just have to stick around and see what I'm talking about. I think the interior is getting pretty close to being ready for primer. Check out the next episode to see how priming goes. As always, appreciate you being here. We'll see you on the next one, huh?